Welcome back to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, once again bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, my guest, during her near-death experience, traveled into a heavenly place, but not without traveling through a hellish one. Joining me, ladies and gentlemen, today is near-death experiencer Kathy McDaniel. Kathy, welcome to Real Spiritual Talk Radio.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Absolutely. Now, Kathy, I understand your near-death experience was probably outside of the average near-death experience because in order to get to this heavenly place, you had to go through this unimaginable place. Is that correct?
That's correct. That only happens less than 20% of the time for people.
Statistically speaking, that is correct. I've read the same thing in various books on the topic of distressing near-death experiences. But before we get into your account, let's walk backwards and try to get a little religious context, if we would, historically speaking. What were you practicing, if any, prior to your near-death experience in terms of religion and or spirituality?
My family was Roman Catholic and very heavy into that. I always went to Catholic schools from first grade on up to 1 year of college. I was a very devout Catholic. I believed everything I was told. And at one point, I wanted to be a nun, but once I found boys, I figured I didn't want to do that anymore. But yeah, I've always been a Catholic.
Okay, and I'm assuming you were very strict with the religion, just as your parents were.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So why don't we talk now about the actual near-death experience? Why don't you tell us what it was that caused your near-death experience?
I had been asked by a very dear friend of mine to be a co-caregiver for him when he went to Seattle. He had found out he had cancer, leukemia, and they had a research hospital there, and he needed 2 caregivers to go. And I said, sure, in a minute, in a heartbeat. So I went to Seattle and found us an apartment near the research hospital. And he and his other caregiver came up, and we thought it was going to take about 3 months for him to go through the procedures. He was only 53 and had been very healthy up to this point, but it turned into about 9 months. And in this 9-month period, it was very, very stressful. There was a lot of in and out of the hospital. He'd be well, getting much better, and then he would crash. And by the end of this period, he died. And I was so tired, and I was so wrung out, depressed, sorrowful. I was a mess. And so there was a really bad flu going around, and I caught it. And I got sicker and sicker. And finally, I drove myself to one of these doc in the box places. They gave me some medication, sent me home. But later on that night, even before I'd had a chance to take the medication, I started coughing up blood. And so I called a very good friend of mine who drove over and got me back down to the doc in the box. But by then I didn't have a pulse. They took me in an ambulance to a hospital. They got me situated and back in, and then they called my family in. They were all over there, all over the country, and said she's got about a 38% chance of making it. This is called acute respiratory distress syndrome or lung failure. We don't know if we can save her. So they put me into a drug-induced coma with a ventilator. And the doctor, the last thing he said to me was, Kathy, don't worry about anything. You won't be able to remember a thing that goes on because I'm giving you something called white amnesia. So you'll just go to sleep. And he didn't add, hopefully you'll wake up someday, but that was inferred.
And little does he know, you may not have remembered what they did on earth, but I guess this now starts your journey of what you remembered in the spiritual realm, correct?
This is correct. I don't remember anything of that procedure. I was in the coma almost 3 weeks, but somewhere I just became conscious. I was awake, but it was completely dark. There wasn't any sound, and I was understandably confused and a little frightened. And I thought I was in a closet. I mean, I couldn't think of anything else to equate it to. But as I stood, sat, I didn't really know. I was just there. I started noticing that it was getting a little lighter, and it was almost a reddish glow. And I thought to myself, well, maybe it's the sun coming up. I've been someplace dark. But when it came up, the glow, it brighter, but it was reddish, and it was a swirling fog, and I couldn't see into the fog. And I felt very uncomfortable, a little wary. I just thought this isn't a good thing, I don't think. And then it started getting warm. I smelled something really bad, and then I started hearing people shrieking and moaning, and I really was confused then. And then all of a sudden, out of this fog boomed this voice, "Do you know where you are?" Sounded very unfriendly. And I thought and I thought and I thought, oh, I hope I'm wrong. And I just whispered, "Hell?" And the voice just boomed, this horrendous, horrible boo-ah laugh. Well, that just spooked me, and I just turned and ran to get away from it. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to run. Lamont, then it turned into, it's just so hard to explain to people. The best I can give a metaphor, it was like being in different movie sets, one after another. It would be like this glowing light would just kind of come up with the fog, and then I'd find myself in a weird place. And the first one was like somebody had bombed New York City, and this was what was left. There were buildings toppled over, and the skyline, all the windows were blown out, and the sky was again this reddish swirling, and concrete, big huge chunks of concrete with rebar sticking out of them. And boom, I'm just like standing there all of a sudden. And I knew that this was, well, maybe that's what happened. Maybe somebody dropped a bomb, and this is where I am. So I kind of ducked down behind some concrete because I was standing out in the middle of like this burning area. And I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, I have to be safe. I have to, you see enough of these horror movies about these things happening, and you think, okay, I kind of know what to do. But I kind of saw this, I thought a person that was tucked in with some more concrete. And I thought, well, okay, that's a start. Maybe we can get together. Two's better than one. So I kind of yelled out to him, hello, I'm over here. Can we get together? Maybe we can find supplies or something. And he didn't move, but I couldn't really see his face, but he just said, "We are all alone here." And I thought that was a pretty odd thing to say, but I thought, well, he's not going to get together. But then I started hearing weird noises, like this big scuttling kind of sound, like a huge spider, a metallic spider might make as it scuttled along. And a big shadow went by with it. And I tucked back in, and I thought, holy, what? Maybe it's aliens. Maybe they destroyed the city. Again, I was alone, and I was just thinking wildly. So I thought I'd better try and run from it. The things kind of went off to one side. In the book, it's got a lot more detail. There was a lot more that happened, but bottom line is I tried to run from it, tried to get over the top of a fence, and I fell. And as I fell, it all went black, and then another scene came up. I had no choice. I just had to keep going. Some were worse than the others, but they were all bad. The next one, I'll skip over to another one. There were so many. I felt like, Lamont, that I was there when I came back, and I really was laying in that bed and I couldn't move. And I couldn't talk to anybody. And I just kind of replayed the thing in my mind. And I thought I must have been gone 2 years, but they told me I was only gone 3 weeks, and it was very hard. So the next time I was in a place, all I can describe this being was a demon. It was very, very large. It had like tattered clothing on. It had a big like club, threatening me. And of course, just having the lights come on like that and be standing next to that huge creature was shocking. And I thought, oh, I'm toast now. And he said, do you want to get out of here? And I thought, speaks English. That's weird. I said, yeah, of course. And he says, well, you do one thing for me, just one task I have for you, and I'll see that you get out. And I thought, oh, thank goodness. I said, sure. What do you want done? And then the lights came up, and as far as I could see was all these blackberry vines, really thick vines that were all looped on top of each other. Oh, probably 6, 8 feet tall, as far as I could see. And I thought, what's going on? Because in my lifetime, I've moved into houses where they have all these blackberries and you have to cut them down about 6 inches at a time. It takes days and days and days. So I said, okay. And he handed me these like scissors they give children in kindergarten so they don't cut themselves when they're. And then he started laughing. And I thought, well, that's a cruel, what is going on? And he just looked at me and I thought, well, I'll show you. And I got down as far as I could, being all scratched up, and I started gnawing away on one of these vines. Well, it took quite a while, but I finally cut it. And when I went to put it behind me so I could take the next vine, when I turned back around, it had grown back to the original size. And this being starts laughing, this very cruel laugh. And I thought, this is impossible. And he says, just give up, just despair. You're never going to get out of here. And I thought, no, despair, that's a bad word. I can't give up. I'm a survivor. I'm not going to quit. So I went to start cutting again. Boom, the scene changed. This happened a lot. In between some of the scenes, I would find myself on this like dirt rocky road. And it was just a flat horizon. At the very end was that glowing in the sky, and sometimes there'd be a pile of rocks. Sometimes there wouldn't. There were no signs. It just went one way or the other. I flipped a mental coin and went to the right. And it was probably about 6 feet wide, and I could barely see it, but I felt a little safer there because nothing could like creep up on me without me knowing. So I would walk and walk and walk and walk and walk. Then another scene would come up. I never knew. It was always a surprise. One of the worst was all of a sudden it was terribly bright, and I looked up and it looked like I was in a hospital corridor. As far as I could see down was just a corridor, and then there was a door on either side, and it smelled antiseptic. And I thought, okay, well, this is good. Maybe there's people here. Maybe I can find a way out. But as I looked to the right and the left, trying to decide which door to go to, here comes another one of these demons. It looked very similar, but it had like a truncheon, like they have in prisons for beating up prisoners. And he came running full speed at me and then just stopped. So I had to look up, and he says, "You've got another job." And I thought, great. And he says, you're going to go in this room on the right, you're going to take what they give you, and you're going to go to the room on the left and put it down. And this is going to be your job. And I thought, room, that's good. Maybe there's a door. Maybe there's somebody back there. I'll just play along. So I went into this room. And I was confused at first. I thought, what is going on? It was like a bunch of patients on gurneys, and they had sheets over them, and people were sitting in front of them on stools. And I thought I couldn't figure it out. And then it dawned on me that these were women. And I thought, oh, this can't be good. And one of the doctors raised his hand, and it was all bloody and smeared with something. And I just stared at him, and he turned around and screamed at me, "Get over here." So I went running over, and he said, "Here." And he handed me what I assumed to be the results of an abortion in my hands. And I'm a pro-lifer. I used to work for a group that helped ladies, and I just stared, and he says, "Take it in the other room." So I went back in the hall, and the demon just stared at me and pointed to the other door. So I went into that room, and Lamont, it was terrible. It was this huge, huge room, like a Costco warehouse, and it was pile after pile, really high piles, 10, 15 feet tall, with all the remains of these little babies. Totally freaked out. I put the little thing down, and I went back in the hall, and he says, back you go. And I said, I'm not doing that. And he says, oh, you don't know what you're bringing upon yourself. And I said, well, I'm not. It's wrong, it's disgusting, and I'm not going to do it. And I crossed my hands, and he raised the stick, and I just closed my eyes, and boom, I was in another place. So back on the road. The weird thing about my NDE, and a reason that I never felt dead, and I never felt dead. I just felt in great danger, was that I saw two living people. I've never heard of anybody else that's seen two living people that were relatives of mine in different scenarios. And what transpired between us was scenes that were just mean. They were mean to me. They were just, and when I got back, I knew I had to give each of them a message from hell, which is not, you know, very well received by most people when you say I was in hell and I saw you there, and and I saw you, and I have to give you this message. There's something in your life you really have to change. It's, if you don't, it's just not going to be good for you. Well, one of those people never spoke to me again, and the other one was already in a bad situation and didn't have time to listen to me. She says, I've got enough on my mind. I don't have to hear about hell. So later, a couple of years later, I gave her the advice anyway, and she came back to me. It was like 3 years later at Christmas, and said, gave me a glass of wine and says, I need to ask you about that hell thing again. And I says, sure. And I told her she says, oh my gosh, that is just a total metaphor for what I was going through. And just hearing what you said about that must have stuck with me, because I got out of that situation. And I'm so glad, because I was about ready to kill myself. And I said, oh, well, good. Something good came out of that. But meanwhile, back in hell, I think probably toward the end, again, there was lots of other things going on. But I was walking on the road, and I'd never met anybody except maybe on that one friend of mine on the side. And all of a sudden, I could see, like, it was dark, it kind of, darkish, and I could see these figures kind of, I don't know, limping around and bumping into one another. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's like zombie apocalypse or something down here, because they were making weird noises. They had ragged clothing. And I thought, I'm not going through this little city or whatever it is. Maybe I can go around. But as far as I could see, they were like meandering. I thought, well, the only thing I can do is like put my eyes down and maybe grasp what's left of my clothes and kind of shuffle through this crowd. Maybe they won't notice me. They'll think I'm one of them. That didn't happen. They must have smelled fear or something, because they started backing up. And as they did, the women were on the outside. They had like skirts and things on their heads. And the men just kind of turned and went around me. Frightened beyond belief I was. And one guy just came up and pushed me, hit me in the chest, and knocked me down. And then they all attacked me. Attacked is the only word I can use. And sometimes people say, well, if you didn't have a body, how would you feel attacked? And it's like, the closest I can come is when you're in kindergarten, third grade, whatever, and a bully comes up to you, and he's used to punching people in the face, and he comes up to you and he punches you like he's going to hit you in the face, but he stops an inch before your nose, and you still feel that rush, that terror. You back up, you scream. That's all I can equate it to. I felt beaten up and all the other stuff that they did to me. And then they backed up, and one leaned over, and I can remember, hell's a terrible place. The skin was kind of falling off his face, and he had sores all over him. And he said, we all have AIDS, and now you have it too. And the bad thing, you can't die. You'll just get worse and worse. And then he laughed, and they all left. There I was on the ground. This demon kind of lady came up and says, you're one of us now. Get up. And there was all a bunch of other women, quite a few. And she says, "Come with me." I had no place to go. I was just about at the end of my rope. I thought, at least I'm with other what look like humans too. You know, I was starting to feel like this wasn't going to end well. And we walked. It started to snow. And it snowed and snowed and snowed until it was up around our chests. We were walking single file, and cold as hell is a real thing. And we finally got to this really awful, dilapidated cabin thing with no insulation. And we all huddled inside there. And she said, "Well, now we wait for customers." And I knew that was probably going to be unpleasant. And we were all just sitting on the floor. And I said to her, I've been here a very long time. And this seems like a particularly dark, heavy time. I know I'm tired, but something's different. And she says, "Oh, well, it's Christmas on Earth, and that's always the worst day in hell." And then it dawned on me, there's no shoving this out of my mind anymore where I was. And I thought, well, I'm still going to fight. And so I started singing a Christmas carol. And she was she was halfway across the room. She turned around and she yelled, "Shut up." And I kept singing my favorite Christmas carol, "Away in a Manger." And some of the other ladies started singing too. And now she's really shouting. And it's "Away in a manger, no crib for his bed, the little Lord." And when I got to that part, she jumped like a spider at me, screaming. And I just closed my eyes. And boom, it changed. It was totally light. I was infused with this love and joy and bliss. And I could remember nothing about what had happened anywhere, anything, except this sensation of swimming in love. Every molecule just so ecstatic. And I just, it's, you can't explain heaven. You can do a good job on hell, but heaven is really hard. It was just total bliss and love. And then it kind of, the light kind of separated a little bit, and it seemed like a big room, all white walls and white floor, and this beautiful, warm, wonderful light. And over to the one side, I kind of noticed something odd. It was like an architect's table. It was white, and it had a great big book on it. It was open about halfway. And I thought, now I remember being shown something in that book. What was it? And as I looked front, there was my best friend who had died the month before. And he looked great. He had just before he died of leukemia, of course, no hair. He was all blotchy and purple and terrible, and he looked great. And instead of looking 53, he looked about 35. And instead of gray hair, he had brown hair, and he was wearing a sweater I gave him. And he was just so happy to see me. He was kind of doing this little jig thing, And I thought, oh my gosh. And then it dawned on me, he doesn't even know he's dead. And I put my hands over my mouth, and he started laughing. And I thought, wait a minute, he read my mind. And I thought, all right, if he's dead, then I must be dead. And it was like the best news I ever got. And I was so excited and so happy. And I said, "So what are we doing in this room? Show me around. I'd love to see the rest of this." And he came up kind of slowly, and he didn't get so close as I could touch him. And he just says, "Now, Mary Kay," which is what he always called me, "you've got too much left to do." I thought, I hope I'm misunderstanding this. Are they throwing me out? And I just said, no, absolutely not. And I crossed my arms. I remember stamping what I thought was my foot. And he just laughed. And boom, it wasn't funny anymore. I have I think I did like a timeout period there. I think, sometimes you go, like I was in this beautiful meadow, like who cares? And then this stream, and I had to follow this stream, and I met three beings that gave me a message to give to somebody. And I was like resigned. I mean, there was nothing I could do about it. This was pleasant too. Hopefully I would go a long time, but then all of a sudden it was just too bright again. And when I looked, I was in a hospital room. There's my family, whom I hardly recognized. And my daughter turns around and says, "Oh my God, Mother's back," and everybody's yaying and so happy and pat me. And I'm so discombobulated. I have been several places in a very short period of time. I can't talk. There was something in my throat. I couldn't move. I thought they'd wrap me in duct tape or something. And I was so hot. And they had blankets on top of me. And I thought, why are they torturing me? What is going on? So finally, my daughter sat down and says, "Now, Mom, you've been really sick and you've been asleep." And I thought, no, that's not what I've been at all. And it's going to be a while. They think you're going to be okay. It's just going to take a long time, Mom, but we're all here to help you. Well, I was not happy. I was so angry. It boiled down to the fact that I was on a nasal tube for 3 weeks. I went in there weighing about 104 pounds, and now I weighed 86. I had no muscle mass left. That's why I couldn't move. I could blink and move this finger. That was it. And I overheard the doctor a couple days later saying, "We don't know how brain damaged she is, but she'll never work again. She might be able to drive a car, but she's going to need to, live with someone." And I can't tell you how depressing all that was. And all I could think about was these damn demons. And I thought, you mean I've got to go through this again someday? Being a Catholic, I thought that was purgatory. And I'll just stop there. Catch my breath.
Well, let me just say this. There is a lot to chew on there concerning your near-death experience. And just as there is a lot to chew on, I have a lot of questions. But I'll start with, first and foremost, what year did this happen?
It happened on the evening of 1999, December 31st. The ball was coming down, and I went somewhere else.
So this was New Year's Eve that you had your near-death experience.
Well, I don't know. I was in the experience. I was out for 3 weeks. At one point, they had called my folks to say, "We can't save her. She's dying, and you just have to say goodbye." So I'm assuming that's what happened. Now I know it's been proven that in comas that you can transition, you can float out and go to other realms. So that's what happened.
That is correct. Because, many near-death experiencers have also stated that. Now, 2 points I want to make here. I noticed that you said your near-death experience jumped from scene to scene. I have interviewed a few near-death experiencers who had distressing near-death experiences, and believe it or not, theirs also jumped from scene to scene. So I think that's something. Yeah, I think that's something that researchers really need to start looking at, these segmented near-death experiences. In addition to that, I've also interviewed distressing near-death experiencers who talked about these hecklers, these demonic entities that kind of play on your fears, play on your worst nightmare. They play on your psychology, because I noticed in your case, every time they came close to actually physically attacking you, except for the AIDS one, boom, you went into another segment or into another a realm where you started the experience all over again. So it's as if they were just trying to play games with you, for lack of better words.
Right. Make you despair. They want you to give up.
Correct. And I also noticed, however, that when you started to sing this Christmas carol that included the title Lord, is when they began to back off and the scene began to change into a heavenly one. I've also heard several near-death experiencers who said that they were either on their way into a hellish experience or in the hellish experience, and when they reached out for some sort of higher power, such as God, Jesus, etc., that's when the demonic entities or evil entities, whatever they are, begin to back off or pull back, and they realized that they were in another more peaceful and blissful realm, such as the one you went into eventually.
Right, right. That's pretty common. And people ask me, well, why didn't you, call out the name of Jesus earlier? Well, A, I didn't know I was dead. That was a biggie. And two, I've had a lot of time to think about this, 23 years. And I think part of that was God does not go where God is not wanted. And in the hellish realm, God is not, he's not there. So I had no way to connect and remember that part of my religion because all my life I prayed, all my life. And so why prayer didn't occur to me there. Another thing is I believe that we choose everything that happens to us. And I believe I chose to have that experience so that I could come back and share it and my lessons with other people.
And that's exactly what my next question was actually going to be. Why do you feel you had this particular hellish near-death experience? I know you mentioned you were able to come back and attempt to help two people. You helped one out of the two, and perhaps it wasn't for you, but it was for those who were in need.
Well, not just them. It's what I learned, Lamont, over 23 years and being with the Ions people. I love the formerly dead. We're just really cool, different people. You have a whole different spin on this whole existence. We believe that, we start in heaven, pieces of God. We're all happy. We choose to come down and learn lessons because everything's perfect in heaven. I've heard that people who choose to go to earth, that's the toughest gig you can pick. And so you get, I don't know, an extra brownie point or something for doing earth. But there were a lot of things I wanted to learn. And another thing, you've quoted Nancy Evans Bush before. She saved me because she's the first one to say that people that have the distressing experiences are usually the brave souls. They're brave enough to come into a situation like this, learn the lessons, and bring it back for humanity, so they don't have to learn them. And what came just like bold out of this was God is all loving and all forgiving, and would never condemn anybody to hell. So that leaves me with why was I there? Because I believed it. I believe I manifested that. I used distressing parts of my life and I made my own hell. Because from the time I was a little child, I was told that nobody goes straight to heaven. Maybe Mother Teresa, but the rest of us have to go to purgatory and, burn our sins off or pay for our misdeeds before we're pure enough to go before God. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker. I lived my whole life believing that. So when I died, of course I believed that. I took that with me. But I'm just here to tell people, skip the trip. It doesn't have to happen. God does not cause this. It's the misinformation that you have been given and that you have chosen to incorporate into your psyche. You got to get rid of it.
And I'm very thankful for near-death experiencers and their ability to interview, be conducted with interviews, because as I always tell people, I think as children, we were all miseducated, especially on the topic of religion. And until you hear a near-death experiencer's journey, it sounds very foreign to you, but so many people are having these things, you just can't, push them to the side.
That's right.
Another thing you said you really didn't reach out to God earlier because you didn't know you were dead, which actually speaks for how hyper real this experience must have felt to you.
Oh, yeah. It didn't even occur to me. Some people said, well, didn't you look down? Well, how often do you look down at yourself? And how long was I didn't have a watch. I didn't have a mirror. Come on. I was running for my life through this experience. That's what I was doing. I was trying to survive because I was alive, I thought. Well, your consciousness is just you. the body is just a car that we drive around in, So when you step out of that body, you're just you. You have no idea that you're not you.
It's the true you versus the you that's inside of the you.
Yeah, right. This kind of, mucked up with all the things that happen in the brain. The brain is not always our friend.
Correct. Now, many near death experiencers talk about returning back from a near death experience with what we call after effects. They may have precognition, uh, higher empathy levels, lacking of the fear of death. Did you come back with anything remotely close to these, or anything that made you more unusual than you were before you had your near death experience?
It would be all of the above. No, I'm not afraid of death. It took me a while to get over that thing about hell, though. I mean, it was really wonderful to go take the 23 years to be able to clarify what actually happened there. I have I don't feel like a victim anymore. Okay, that's huge because everything that happens to me, I planned. And I planned it because I wanted to learn a lesson. So now when something comes along and daily things go wrong, and I just say, well, what's the lesson? I don't blame people if they're mean to people. It's just a freer way to live. It's just, so much less stressful. And yeah, I've got the intuition thing. People can be talking to me, how you doing? I'll say, and they'll say, oh, fine. I think, you're not telling me about your husband, or you're not telling me about that. I don't interfere. I just understand that sometimes we don't feel like sharing things. And I can feel if someone, just even online, somebody sends me a text or something having to do with my book. And I think, that's got a bad vibe to it. Delete, it's kind of, yeah, it's our own intuition, but it's like on steroids.
Yeah, you're going to get a lot of skeptics out there in the world too,
Yeah.
unfortunately, especially in this internet age. Uh,
Yeah.
so, so speaking of religion, growing up, I know you were Catholic. Are you still Catholic, or did this near-death experience change that in some way, shape,
It,
or form?
it changed it from the roots. It took me a very long time to be able to back out of it. It started with not being able to say the prayers. I mean, I was always going to mass, on Sundays and during Lent every day and all that. So I couldn't say things just as simple as, and Jesus sits at the right hand of God the Father on the throne and the angels. And I thought, people. There are no thrones. This whole thing about wanting to wait to the last judgment, there's not going to be one. And everybody's bodies are going to rise from the earth. Who wants a body? No bodies. There's just spirits. And you don't want one anyway. So it all unraveled. And there was hardly anything left that I could hang on to. So, no, I think spirituality is the only word we can use, just that we know. We don't have to have faith anymore because we know. We know who God is. We've experienced God. God is just all love and wonderful. And we can't wait to get back and tell our stories with all our soulmates that came down. It's going to be so much fun to be back there. Yeah, changes you. You can't help it.
Talk to us about your book. What's the title, and where can we find it?
It's called Misfit in Hell, and that's because I kept saying no to all the demons, to heaven expat, and we are all heaven expats. We all start in heaven, we come down to earth and do our work, and then we go back to heaven. So we're expatriates. So it's about a memoir about my life. I come from a very funny family. There was a lot of crazy, silly things that happened in my family. So there's a lot of joy and humor and interesting, probably things people can relate to in family situations. And then the hell experience. It's like 12 chapters out of 100, but it's very detailed about what happened because I can't get rid of any of it. I mean, that's another reason it's in your soul. It didn't happen in your brain. And it's on Amazon and wherever books are sold. I've got a website that's www and then the title of the book. And I've been on lots of podcasts, and I just love it. It's just such a great way to get the message out. And I really appreciate you having me on the show. You do a really good job. You're kind of an exceptional podcaster.
Well, that's great to hear. I thank you for those compliments. And I thank
Yeah.
you for coming on and sharing your absolutely fascinating account.
Thanks, Lamont.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kathy McDaniel.
Blessings.